Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, Michael people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Counting down the days and weeks until Christmas and the New Year, but just seconds away from getting your fix on all of what's happening in the world of sports, as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And as we get set for a big football weekend, I have to start off with the college because a couple nights ago with the selection committee, we'll unpack a little bit of that. I know that there's a big giant murmur down in South Florida, Coral Gables, when it comes to the University of Miami, which I'll get to in a second. But when we take a look at what's going to transpire as conference championship weekend is just about here. It will start tomorrow, in fact, where the first big game of note will be UNLV and Boise State. That will be a contest that will start around 8 a.m. on Fox, or 8 p.m. Did I say a.m.? Here I am working in the a.m., and I have just morning in the brain. But you'll have the Mountain West Conference settled there tomorrow night, Boise State, where we would think that they will be victorious and punch their ticket as one of the top 4 seeds there in the country to have a bye and won't have to worry until having to play New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, depending on where the schedule falls at that time. But with that game kicking us off and then into Saturday with the matchups, whether in the Big 12, Iowa State going against Arizona State. Of course, you have Texas and Georgia going to go at it, Clemson, SMU. There's not going to be a lot of drama this weekend with all the drama that we've had in college football over the course of the last 6 weeks. You're not going to really have a lot here, even if you are the University of Miami and you're chomping at your fingernails and sitting at the edge of your seat, hoping that by Tuesday of next week, the selection committee will take a look and see whether or not that the Hurricanes do deserve to be there. And me personally, I don't think they do. I'll get into that in a second. But unless you have something that's just wild, zany, crazy, just borderline off the chain. And what I mean by that is if you're going to get a blowout loss, in particular with Clemson SMU, because if the Southern Methodist University, my tongue is tied this morning, people, so not, J Reels, let's wake up, let's go. For SMU to put forth a good contest that even if they lose, let's say 38-24, or they were in the game there second half and it just gets away from them, I'm sure the selection committee is going to look at SMU as a team that even if they lose, that they may be able to sneak into the back door. But chances are, because it's for a conference, and if Clemson does win, a lot of people are going to look at the committee and say, well, Clemson's going to have to qualify based on what they've done there in the ACC, albeit a very poor conference. But really what it boils down to is that you're going to have the winner of that game, and even if it's a situation where SMU gets bombarded, then maybe you could actually have Miami sneak in. But when you think about it, forget about what's going to happen with tomorrow night. Boise State, they win, they're in. Same for early on Saturday with Arizona State and Iowa State. One of those two in the Big 12, they're going to win and be in. And you would think the same here for Clemson SMU. Now, if SMU wins, no ifs, ands, buts, babies about it, they're going to punch their ticket to the college football playoffs. So it's just going to be a matter of how Clemson beats SMU in order for maybe Miami to sneak in through the back door. Because other than that, and again, that's going to be a scenario where even if Clemson, whether they win by 1 or win by 50, you would think because of them winning the ACC that they're obviously going to be one of those top 4 seeds. Do they deserve that? That's where the college football committee is going to have to rethink that throughout the offseason into next year, because we all know Clemson doesn't deserve to get one of those top 4 seeds, because right now when you think about it, the 4 seeds in question are Oregon, Texas, SMU right now, and Boise State. And there's no way you could put Notre Dame even with a better record, or even if Georgia does win the SEC with 2 losses, if they lose a third, you can even argue whether or not they deserve to be there. But we would think that Georgia, even if they do lose, they would be a part of the college football playoff. But now as it centers around Miami, And I get it. There are a lot of people there in South Florida that are going to think, well, we only have 2 losses. Granted that they came late in the year to Georgia Tech and then just this past weekend against Syracuse. But knowing that we have 2 losses, and let's just say for argument's sake, if Texas does beat Georgia in the SEC Championship, a lot of people are going to think, well, wait, Miami should all of a sudden be that final team to get that spot, to get Georgia out, considering that Miami has 2 losses and Georgia will have a 3rd loss in their ledger. Not going to work that way, only because of the competition that Georgia's faced. And I get it that there's going to be a faction of those Hurricane fans and people who have the pom-poms out for the ACC to think that, well, it's not Miami's fault that we play the dregs of our conference, whether it's North Carolina. I know they've been generally good for the most part, but whether it's them, and I don't want to hear about Florida week 1 when they played back in the final day of August where they beat them 41-17. And yes, we could talk about Florida being a formidable opponent, but nobody was thinking about that in the first half of the college football year when Florida was floundering. And even though they came on strong there in the second half, playing well against Georgia, throwing a couple of upsets along the way, LSU, etc. But still, as much as that could be a feather in the Hurricanes' cap, but that was back in the summertime, officially, when you think about it. So for Miami to puff their chest out to think that if Georgia loses or if SMU loses by 50, that, hey, we deserve to be in the college football playoff, you're going to have to pump the brakes. And yes, you do play in a poor conference, and there's nothing you could do about it. But if you would have won your game against Syracuse, you would have had a chance to play in the ACC final and therefore controlled your destiny to know that if you would have won the game there on Saturday against Clemson, and you would obviously qualify, or if you would have lost that game, you'd be out. But you blew it, and you don't have a game this weekend. So therefore, Georgia does, and they have the right to, of course, put themselves in a position where they're going to go into the playoff with a victory. And even if they lose, based on their conference, strength of schedule, the teams that they've beaten, and not only that, but also the teams that they've lost to. Because you can even argue whether or not some of the teams that they've lost to, whether it be Ole Miss, Alabama, where right now Alabama is ranked in that college football playoff, and they're actually 11th as of right this moment, where Ole Miss is 13th. Think about this, sandwiched between Miami is Alabama and Ole Miss, but Ole Miss could say, well, hey, we have a very good resume. We beat Georgia early this year, so why not us be that team that goes on and plays December 20th or 21st when the playoff will begin? So there is a lot that could be discussed. There's a lot that can be bandied about. But the one thing is, if you're a Hurricane fan, and I understand the year you've had, I understand that you also have a Heisman Trophy finalist, and who knows, he may win the whole thing. Although a lot of people will think Travis Hunter of Colorado will win the Heisman Trophy, which will be next Saturday down in the New York Athletic Club, which is, of course, the spot that they always have the Heisman Trophy winner and the ceremony. But if you're a Hurricane fan, I get it. You could be crying in your beer. You could be hoping and praying that your team somehow, some way gets in and that the selection committee will look at the big body of work and kind of dismiss that loss against Syracuse, which you can't, because you had a 21-0 lead and then they came all the way back and they won, and we know the whole story there. But what you have for this weekend, unfortunately, is what's going to happen with that Clemson-SMU deal. We know about the Mountain West and the Big 12. Whomever wins that is going to automatically be in. And really what's going to boil down to is that game. So it's 3 teams for 2 spots. And whether or not the selection committee, if it's a thing where they feel that SMU doesn't belong, because right now they're currently ranked where? They are currently 8th in the country. And I know that's a deal where, yes, even if they were to fall out of the top 12, which right now Miami's at 12th, and I get it, people are going to say, well, wait, how could you have Miami ranked in the top 12 and not have them in as far as the college football playoff goes? Well, you know that one of these teams are going to win, and especially in particular, the Iowa State, Arizona State, because obviously those teams aren't ranked there, but because they play in the Big 12 and they play in the big conference, that the winner of that matchup is going to go in as a representative for that conference in the playoff. And it's unfortunate. It's just the luck of the draw there with the Hurricanes. If you would have won your game on Saturday against Syracuse, there'd be no question about it. You'd be a part of this playoff mix. But there isn't anything more else that I could say or even fight for. I'm not a Hurricane fan. Not that I'm even a Hurricane hater for that regard, but with the way everything is shaken down here, you're not going to be able to, even if it's a thing where Penn State loses. Well, Penn State has 2 losses. Well, they've had a big enough year to have them be rewarded a spot in the playoff. I mean, that's all there is to it. There isn't anything else, even Texas for that matter. If Georgia beats them again and 2 losses for Texas, and look, they lost to Georgia twice, but they really deserve to be there. Yes, they've had a big enough year, and granted that they didn't beat a lot of the big teams in the SEC or even play a lot of the big teams when you think about it. And yes, they did play Georgia, and they beat A&M, I get it, but they didn't play Alabama. They didn't play Tennessee. I believe they didn't play Tennessee off the top of my head. No, they may have played Tennessee early on in Texas, but they didn't have that slate that Georgia had as far as their schedule goes, where they had the gauntlet, as I talked about here over the last couple of weeks. But for Ohio State, you know that they're going to be in, even if they lose, which they're, as a matter of fact, they're not even playing, because I'm thinking that they're automatically in the Big Ten Championship. And I'm going to get to that game also as well when we talk about the weekend. I didn't mention that because those 2 teams, whether Oregon wins or loses, and the same for Penn State, those teams are going to be in. So it's not even a discussion to bring up whether or not those teams lose. Obviously, if Oregon loses, they haven't lost this year. So if they have 1 loss on their ledger, no big deal. Penn State, you could argue 2 losses and against 2 big teams, but then again, that's where the committee's going to look at. So, well, hey, they did lose to Ohio State as well as Oregon. So for the rest of the top 12, I get it. If you're Miami, you're going to be stewing a little bit. You're going to hope for a blowout there. Clemson over SMU to maybe somehow, if Miami will stay there at 12 and SMU falls out of the top 12. But even then, I can't see that. So that's what we're looking at here. To me, that's the game that everybody's going to zero in on. If the Mustangs aren't going to be able to get out of that game, not necessarily alive, but if they get bludgeoned in the process, how that's going to fare for the Hurricanes and what the committee is going to choose here come Sunday, Monday into Tuesday when they have their show there Tuesday night, and then we'll have the final 12 in place, and obviously with the brackets, etc. Because I'm not even going to get into the brackets. We know which teams are there. Right now, let's get a finalization of everything once we get past this weekend, and then we could kind of delve into the matchups as we get ready for the playoff, which begins 2 weeks from tomorrow. And as we look at the weekend too, as I mentioned, just to kind of handicap these games, Boise, you would think, obviously, with them playing in their building, and UNLV, who's had a good year, I couldn't even tell you 1 player on UNLV, so I'm not even going to go there. I would think Boise State, with what they've done here this year, and for everything that's building on this game, knowing that they could punch their ticket, and they're a team that's dangerous, led by that running back who we all know is going to be part of the Heisman Trophy discussion. Whether or not he's going to win it is another thing altogether. But when you're looking at the Broncos and how they're going to be able to, I think, win this game, and not to say they're going to go running away, would I be shocked? Absolutely not. But I would really be stunned if they lose this game because, like I said, just the build-up and everything leading into this game, knowing that the 1 loss that they had was against Oregon. It was a close game, too. I believe they lost, 32-30? Oh, excuse me, 37-34. And that was all the way back in week 2. So knowing that they have just run the table since then, that they're going to bank on this first game. And I understand they got the spotlight, too, considering that they're the one that's leading into the weekend with all the games and the matchups. But I like them. And the same for Arizona State. They've played well here. We've seen what they've done here over the last few weeks, beating Kansas State as well as BYU, 2 teams that are ranked in the top 15, 16 in the nation. And with that game being in Arlington, in Dallas, where I know there's going to be, not to say that this is a big-time spotlight type of game, because a lot of people are going to look at Clemson at SMU, or a lot of people are even going to look at Oregon and Penn State to see where Penn State stacks up against the Ducks. But I think Arizona State, with their momentum and what they've done here, especially over the last few weeks, I think they're going to win over Iowa State. And I know Iowa State is a pretty good defense based on what I've seen and even read for that matter. But I would think Arizona State will prevail and go on and win the Big 12 championship. Georgia, Texas. I know that this is a rematch of what happened there down in Austin. And is this going to be a carbon copy? I don't know if that's going to be the case. I would think Texas, they've been stewing all week knowing that they've had this beatdown in their own building. And granted that the game is not going to be played there, it's actually going to be a pseudo home game for Georgia because it's going to be played in the Mercedes-Benz dome where the Falcons play. But I think this is going to be a little bit more competitive than the first go around. And to me, if I'm the Longhorns, you're going to have to do whatever it takes. That first 7.5 minutes of the first quarter is going to be paramount. Because if Georgia's flying like the way they did on defense there in that game, what was it, late October or mid-October, and for them to slow down that Texas offense and Quinn Ewers, who, as we all know, has been ailing there with that bum ankle, and if they are going to be flying out of the gate and playing at the high level that that defense is known to play at, then Texas, they're going to be going upstream without a paddle throughout the whole game. They're going to have to get on the board early. They're going to have to stem that tide, whether it be the fans that are going to be in the building or just the momentum that Georgia's going to have, especially coming off of that 8 overtime win. And maybe the Longhorns could think about that and try to use that to their advantage, to try to play to their weakness, where not necessarily their defense, but knowing that they could be a little bit tired, knowing that they had an emotional game. They were down 17-0. They came all the way back. And then, of course, the 8 overtimes that they had. So for Texas, I would try to grind this out, maybe not put it in Ewers' hands that much, keep it simple to where you can eat up some clock, get that defense sucking wind when you get to the second half, because if you're going to have 3 and outs or short drives, or you're going to be punting throughout the first half, and Carson Beck, if he gets in a groove and he gets that offense in sync, forget about it. Texas is going to really be on their heels the whole night, or they're going to be trying to force situations there offensively, which could lead to turnovers, and it could be a long night there, or really long afternoon for the Longhorns as they're going to play that game at 4 o'clock. But I think Georgia's going to win this game. I think they survived that game against Georgia Tech, and knowing that if they are on their P's and Q's defensively, yes, a little bit of that home field advantage, that could go a long way. Now, we've seen Georgia lose in a spot in the past. We saw them lose to Alabama last year. And remember, they were riding high going into that game, and even Alabama the same, after beating Auburn on that 4th and goal from the 31, the Jalen Milroe pass. But we've seen them fall here in this spot. And even in the past, we go back to the other games against Alabama, the Tua to Devontae Smith in the end zone, the comeback there, and a bunch of other games that, for whatever reason, Georgia has not been able to deliver. But I'm going to trust that Georgia, based on not necessarily last year because it's a new year, but if they're going to think back to a year ago this time when they lost the SEC Championship, and they know that, hey, we win, we're in. We don't want to have the selection committee have any doubts if we lose this game, even if they lose by 10 points and Texas, for whatever reason, dominates the game. They don't want to put any doubt in the selection committee's mind on whether or not, should we put Miami in there, considering that Georgia 3 losses, and I get it, the schedule, etc. I would think Kirby Smart and company will be smart enough to know that, hey, let's try to have a carbon copy of what we did a couple months ago down in Austin, to where we leave no doubt. We show the world that not only that we're back on the stage in the playoffs, that they weren't last year, if you recall, and that they could try to get back to a national championship scenario, and remind you that they won 2 of the last 3, maybe to even think 3 of the last 4 if they were to seal the deal this year. So they have a lot riding on this game, and a lot riding with the momentum that they've had going in. So that's why I like them on Saturday. And then Penn State and Oregon, all I'm going to say is this. Penn State's not going to win this game. I don't think so. Oregon, they're not going to take the pedal off the metal. Can I see Penn State be competitive in this game? And we could argue whether or not they were competitive against Ohio State there. What was it? Last month sometime? But let's see Penn State put up a fight here. Their quarterback is going to be raring to go. Let's see what the tight end, TJ Warren, we would think that he's going to be a big player in this game. They are going to have to show the world here in a Big Ten championship whether or not, now, do they belong in the top 12 based on their record and their mark this year as far as them playing in the Big Ten, which is overrated, I might add, because the Big Ten is down, even with the implementation of USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, etc. But as we know, Michigan, and yes, they did beat Ohio State last week, but come on, they're 7-5 this year. And we could talk about the Northwesterns and the Iowas and the Minnesotas, etc. Those are teams that obviously are not any good. Wisconsin. But let me see Penn State put up a fight here. Let me see them get into the 4th quarter within a score. And not that it's going to be a high-scoring game because we know Oregon could score. Penn State, on the other hand, yeah, they can have their flashes and moments, but let me see them be in this game in the fourth quarter and not in a situation where they're down 27-17 where you know that the game is already in hand for Oregon. I'm going to look at this one way only. If Penn State is a threat and has a chance to win the game, meaning that if it's 27-20 and they have the ball with 6 minutes to go, that I'm going to be thinking, oh, well, hey, they could march on down the field, tie the game, and put a scare into the Ducks. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see it's 27-19 and they just score to make it 27-19 and Oregon has the ball even with 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Because Oregon can just go right down the field. I want Oregon to be in a little bit of danger. I want them to feel like, oh, there's some pressure on us. Now we're going to have to put up some first downs and try to put up some points to extend the lead or whatever. That's what I want to see. Or even better yet, if it's 27-20 and Penn State has the ball with 8 minutes to go, where I'm going to think, okay, Penn State, let's see what you got here. And the head coach, James Franklin, who still hasn't won a big game as head coach of the Nittany Lions. That's what I want to see come Saturday. I don't want to see a game that was 34-24, but it was really 34-10, and the 14 points that they got in the fourth quarter was window dressing. Or yes, I don't want to see it 27-20, where Penn State scores. Now I want to see them make a stop, and then the Ducks go down the field, and even if they kick a field goal, that's still not going to put the Nittany Lions in any shape to where, let me see them put the Ducks on the ropes to where I'm going to be thinking in the back of my mind, this game could be going either way. I want to see some validity on Penn State's part to not only just show up in the game, but be in this game and put them in a position to where they can even tie the game or put a scare into Oregon. No window dressing. I don't want to see that. And that's what you have with the college football. So I think Oregon's going to win. I think Georgia's going to win as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas wins, and I'm sure that's burning inside that game in Austin, and who knows, maybe they come flying out of the gate. Everything that I mentioned about Ewers and trying to be a little bit methodical, I understand that may not be their game, but this is try to wear out that Georgia defense, which wore out that offense, as we know. To me, just a little bit of a reverse psychology from Texas. If they do that, maybe that would be beneficial to them, and I think Arizona State and obviously the SMU game. Listen, I think Clemson just based, and I haven't watched SMU this year, so I haven't really talked about the game, so real quick. Clemson, I'm just basing it on Dabo, their pedigree. I understand this isn't Trevor Lawrence and Trevor Etienne, and even to go back to Deshaun Watson for that matter. But I'm going to say SMU. I'm just not going to pick Clemson because, the history. They've had a big year. Give it up. They've obviously ranked 8th in the nation for a reason. And I'm sure they've heard a lot of the whispers too. Oh, they may not belong. Oh, Miami should be in this game, so on and so forth. So even though the game is in Charlotte, which in essence is a home game for the Tigers, but I would think SMU, I'm sure they've heard it all this week, and I'm sure the coach is hammering it home as far as the message goes. Hey guys, nobody's counting us in. Everybody thinks Miami should be here, etc. So maybe they'll use that as fuel to win the game. Would I be shocked if Clemson wins? Absolutely not. But listen, give them some respect. I'll give them some dap. So I'll say SMU will win the game there on Saturday night. And that is your college football. Looking forward to it. Let's see what's going to happen here. I don't know how crazy it could get as far as if certain teams lose in blowout fashion or whatever it may be. But considering the way the last 6 weeks of this college football season has been, would I be shocked if we get anything less than that? Whether it be tomorrow night or Saturday? Absolutely not. So now as I keep the helmet and shoulder pads on, let me move over to the National Football League. And we have a big game tonight. A Thursday night game, Amazon Prime, which is probably one of the bigger ones that you'll ever see, especially this late in the year, because you can have games early on where you'll have the big matchups or the two big teams or teams that may be playing for playoff spots, etc. But this one is enormous because you have two division rivals, which we know that a lot of the Amazon Prime games are games within the division. But for this one tonight, in the NFC North, Green Bay Packers playing pretty well, 9-3. Detroit Lions, 11-1. Remember, the Lions already have beaten the Packers earlier this year, and they beat them pretty good, and Jordan Love did not have a good game. But for the Packers, their 3 losses this year, when you look at it, they lost to the Eagles there and that opening night in Sao Paulo. They lost to the Vikings there in Green Bay. And, of course, the Lions, as I mentioned. So the 3 losses were against arguably the 3 top teams there in the conference itself. It's not even arguably. It's not even a discussion. The 3 teams that are ahead of them in the conference, they've lost to. And now they got to go on the road to Ford Field to see whether or not that they can make amends from those early season defeats, more so in particular with the Lions, if they have any shot of being part of the division. And remember, they got the Vikings that they're looking up to, so their tiebreaker scenario right now is not looking pretty good. They're 1-2 in the division, and they still have the Vikings to come there in a couple of weeks. So, to me, this game, although we can look at Green Bay and them trying to find a way to get to be a part of the NFC North division discussion, but this is about the Lions. And the reason why I bring that up is because this game is imperative for them to win. And think about it. They both had a week off, which is good. So they're both not coming off short weeks. Remember, Green Bay played last Thursday on Thanksgiving against the Dolphins that night in prime time. And obviously the Lions played on Thanksgiving as well when they, by the hairs of their chinny chin chin, beat the Chicago Bears. So for the Lions, they need this win for this reason. When you're looking at tiebreakers in the NFC, and you have, they already beat the Lions as we know, or excuse me, they already beat the Packers as we know, and if they beat the Packers again, they will have a distinct advantage when it comes to the 1 seed, because if they do lose this game tonight, and let's say end up in a flat-footed tie for the NFC, the Eagles will have the 1 seed based on common opponent. Now, that could be changed if, in fact, the Lions went out. So even if they win tonight and they win out, obviously they're going to have the 1 seed because they have the 1 game advantage. But if they do end in a tie, it's a situation where the Packers, as I mentioned, losing to the Eagles early on, so they have that head-to-head matchup against them. Not that that matters, but it matters when it comes to common opponent, because I understand that they're division rivals and they play 2 games where the Eagles and Packers only played the 1 game, but that factors in to tiebreaker scenarios when it comes to home field advantage. So if the Lions lose this game tonight, and let's just say that both teams, Eagles and Lions, are 15-2, well, they're going to have the same conference record, but then they're going to go with common opponent, and the common opponent is, well, you guys in your 2 losses, the Lions lost to Tampa, where the Eagles also lost to Tampa, but then they lost to the Lions, where the other Eagle lost to Atlanta. And Atlanta has not played Detroit, and I don't think, and they're actually absolutely not going to play them this year. So the other common opponent that they lost to is going to factor in this whole equation when it comes to the number 1 seed in the NFC. So this is a game that is even bigger for the Lions than it is for the Packers. And that's the good thing about this game tonight, because it's not a scenario where, oh, the Packers are going to need it to keep pace. Yes, they do, but the Lions are going to need to, they're going to need to win this game because of the scenario that I mapped out when it comes to getting a bye in the first round and not having to play in the wild card round, and even more so to have that home field and not have to play an NFC Championship game in Philadelphia where it could be 20 degrees, it could be snowing. Who knows what the elements will be on that day for a Lion team that's been playing from in front pretty much from week 2, that last loss that they had against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that is a good matchup to watch tonight. I'll be on top of that as we head into a week 14 in the league. And as far as the schedule goes overall, you have teams that are on a bye, whether you're Denver, Indianapolis, New England, Washington, Baltimore, and Houston. So you're going to have right there 3 games knocked off this coming week. But the schedule overall, not good. Jacksonville, Tennessee, New York and Miami, the Jets that is. Atlanta, Minnesota, all right, that's a decent game, only because Atlanta has to get back on the beam. Kirk Cousins returns to Minnesota. They need to win in the worst way because Tampa's nipping on their heels. And Tampa's playing Vegas in their building. And Tampa's schedule gets soft here down the stretch where the Falcons, they got to go play Vegas on a Monday night the following week. And they still have Carolina. I believe they have another game against New Orleans. I believe they have one more tricky game on their schedule. Let me pull that up real quick. Atlanta, They have Minnesota at the Raiders, Giants. Oh, at the Commanders was the other game. Not going to be an easy game. Where Tampa, their schedule is relatively easy. Again, Vegas here, followed by, my internet's a little slow here. Vegas at the Chargers, at Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. And the Panthers, Saints are 2 games at home. Chargers will be tricky, just like the Commanders will be tricky for Atlanta. And these schedules are comparable. But Atlanta, can you trust going down the stretch, considering the way Kirk Cousins has played? And I understand you can't put all your eggs in a basket if you root for Todd Bowles and company, but Tampa may have a little bit more spark, a little bit more spunk, because Baker Mayfield, for whatever the reason, he can have that one bad game, but it doesn't affect him, similar to how Kirk Cousins, for whatever the reason, he could go into a tailspin. So that's a race that you're going to have to look at down the stretch, which I find fascinating because the Falcons had a, 3-game lead on them, and they swept them in the regular season, and now they're in a flat-footed tie, although they do have the advantage, as you know, with the head-to-head based on their sweep. But for the rest of the 1 o'clock schedule, Saints at the Giants, Carolina at Philadelphia, Cleveland at Pittsburgh, and then your 4 o'clock window is Seattle, Arizona. All right, that's a game where Arizona needs in the worst way. Remember, they lost to Seattle 2 weeks ago, so they're going to have to get themselves back in a tie for first place, because right now you have the Seahawks at 7-5, the Arizona Cardinals 6-6, and then you have the Rams at 6-6, and then the Niners at 5-7. So if the Cardinals win, they'll be in a first place tie with the Seattle Seahawks there in the NFC West. Then you have Buffalo at the Chargers. All right, I guess that's going to be your 425 Fox game for Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady. And then you have the Bears and Niners. And then your Sunday night game, all right, decent. Chargers at Chiefs. And your Monday night game is Cincinnati and Dallas. This is a schedule. If you want to go Christmas shopping, people, this is the weekend to do it, because this is just a terrible slate. And thankfully, you have a good Thursday night game, because that is the highlight game of the weekend. There is no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. So for the husbands, the boyfriends out there, you can look at this Sunday schedule and be like, you know what? I could skip it. I'll just follow it on my phone. Let's go shopping, or let's do whatever throughout the course of your Sunday, because, that is one from hunger, if you ask me. But the other big news of the NFL week, obviously the hit there by Azeez Al Shaair on Trevor Lawrence warranted a 3-game suspension. And we could talk about how the head coach, DeMeco Ryans, and the GM of the Texans, Nick Caserio, they were defending their player, saying that, he's a good guy, good locker room guy, one of the leaders of the team. Meanwhile, he had a couple of other fines earlier this year for hits or illegal hits that he wasn't suspended for. So he has a track record, and I get it. They're not going to throw their player under the bus. They're not going to say anything bad about him, but they can at least say it with an honest eye to say, hey, listen, that hit was a little strong. I could see why they're going to suspend him. I know that there is an appeal that hasn't been any word whether or not they're going to shave that penalty, but right now, I don't think that they're going to do so. If they do, it's probably going to be by 1 game, which, big whoop. And I believe he'd be back for the final game of the year, or final couple of games. Texans do have 5 more games left on their schedule. But listen, that hit is inexcusable, should have never happened, and I get it, the momentum of the player, it's tough to let up when the player's going into a slide and you're going head first and you're trying not to hurt the player there, but he did come in with a forearm and an elbow, and obviously with Lawrence laid out, and not to say he's a top quarterback, yes, he is a former number 1 overall in the league, but is a guy that has had his moments, but certainly has not lived up to his college football status when he played at Clemson, a guy that a lot of people thought was going to be a generational quarterback, and he's been anything but that. But still, whether that's Trevor Lawrence or whether that is the third stringer, it could have been Tommy DeVito, that is one that a flag has to be thrown and even a suspension warranted. So no matter how much the organization wants to defend that player, that is just an act that was dirty, was ugly. Listen, you've seen the video. I don't have to reinforce it. But for him to get the 3 games, and then Lawrence is going to be out for the rest of the year, he is on IR. Why is he going to come back? The team's won 2 games. And who knows? Does the ownership look at, with him being out and with the bad year, does he get a reprieve and come back next year to show and prove Doug Peterson, the head coach, that obviously is well above my pay grade. I would think he would come back for one more year. Granted, last year they were in a free fall in the second half of the year, They had an 8-5 record. They led in the AFC South, and they fell apart quickly to them not even making it into the playoffs. And we know about the last game of the season. They lost, I believe, to the Colts there, where they had a shot. And even though that the Indianapolis, they lost in that game against Texas, which actually won the division for Houston, and that knocked out Jacksonville, come to think of it. But for the head coach, does he survive this? I don't know. Maybe Shad Khan will pull the plug there on Black Monday, the day after the regular season, but he may give him another vote of confidence, knowing that 2 years ago they made it to the playoffs and won a game and got to a divisional round. But this is definitely going to be a situation where if he does get a year, that is it. Whether he gets an extension after that or he's going to be a lame duck, he's going to have to sink for his supper. But that's the situation there in Jacksonville. So NFL, that's what I have. Nothing else to really unpack or discuss when we're talking about the NFL. So I'll move it along there. Let me get to the association as I lace up my high tops, and we'll check to see what's happening on the hardwood. And I'm only bringing this up because the matchups are set for the NBA Cup. And it's interesting because I've been on social media looking at certain situations or people that have remarked about how, oh, I've been following this, and wow, to think that the Hawks made it and the run that they've been on recently, and you have OKC, Houston, and all these different scenarios where people have been riveted by this. And I think to myself, how? We know that the schedule has the NBA Cup groups. It's not as if they're predominantly every night, but there have been nights where there haven't been NBA Cup nights, so to speak. But I haven't been able to get wrapped up in it, as everybody knows if you listen to the podcast. And I got news for you. All you need to know about this in-season tournament is what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander said just a couple of nights ago as they qualified, and they're going to host in the quarterfinals, which begins, and I hate the schedule, the way they have this broken down. From what I recall last year, didn't they play these games Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, to where they got it all taken care of in a matter of 4 or 5 days? So they had their quarterfinals Tuesday, because I remember the Celtics were in the quarterfinal and they lost to the Pacers, and that may have even been the semifinals. That just goes to show you how much I really care about this thing. But I know the Celtics were a part of it, and Indiana, of course, made it to the final, and they lost to the Lakers. But for the way the schedule's broken down, too, I'm flabbergasted. They have the 4 games on Tuesday, then they have the semifinals on Saturday, and then they have the final on the following Tuesday. Why does one play this on Christmas Day then? Get this thing over with. Play this Tuesday, play this Thursday, and play this Saturday. That's it. Get this thing over and out, done with, and then move on with your season. Get to Christmas Day. I know the NFL is going to swallow it up, but you have your extravaganza there on Christmas with the 5 games and move it along. I was just beside myself when I saw the schedule. And I digress. To get back to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and what he said when the reporters had broached to him, hey, you guys have qualified for the quarterfinals in the whole in-season tournament cup scenario. What did he say? He said that he found this confusing because you have point differentials to worry about, and that was the reason why the Celtics didn't qualify, based on, I believe, the Knick game against the Magic the other night, and for SGA to come out to say that, oh, we made it in. I knew that we were in the running, but I didn't know to what extent, and even he said it was confusing. So the players in their own right have no clue or no idea that, yes, they could be in the running for it based on their groups and them winning these games, and knowing that obviously the more they win, similar to like a soccer style tournament, to where obviously if you lose a game or two, you're not going to qualify, or if you do lose one game, you could still qualify, but then there's a point differential. I mean, this is just, to me, it's a complete waste of time. And I know people can at me all you want, and please do so. I don't care. At me all you want. If you've been there since day one and you followed every one of these cup scenarios and games and how the brackets have unfolded, whatever, congratulations to you guys and gals. And great. That doesn't make me any less of a sports fan. That doesn't make me any less of an NBA fan. That doesn't make me, thumb my nose. Yeah, do I to a certain degree? Absolutely. But come on. Does anybody really care who's going to be the NBA in-season champion when it's all said and done? Now think about this. If you're the Knicks, who have qualified, and it's going to be fascinating theater from this regard, because the games next Tuesday, I think it's Orlando, Milwaukee, Dallas, OKC is the Tuesday night matchups, followed by Wednesday, Atlanta playing the Knicks, and then Golden State playing Houston. And Golden State's in a free fall here, and they're not playing, I believe tonight, no Curry or Draymond Green. Are they saving them for the in-season tournament? Who knows? But you're going to have Trae Young playing the Garden. And we know Trae Young has been the most recent and latest villain toward the Knicks fan, and he even made a comment when the Knicks played in Atlanta a few weeks ago when I guess the Knicks contingent who were in Atlanta at that time, when he even said that, yes, by us beating them, he had a big game in their victory over the Knicks. He said, yes, now those Knicks fans, I'm going to send their ass packing or send them home or send something along those lines. So you know the Knicks fan, with the long memory they have, and going back to the playoffs a few years ago in the first round when the Hawks beat them in 5, that they are going to serenade number 11 in red and gold big time next Wednesday night at the Garden. So that's going to be some interesting theater in that in-season tournament scenario. But here's the thing. If you're a Knicks fan, and I get it, you've had nothing to cheer for since the start of the millennia. Is there going to be a situation where if you win that game and go to a semifinal and win that you're going to be geeked up for an in-season championship? And if you win that, are you really going to be that excited to know that you won a championship that means absolutely zero? I don't care. You may, and that's one thing, I'm going to take the pulse of the Knicks fan here over the next few days, and I'm going to bring this back come Monday's podcast, because I need to find out whether or not the Knicks fan is excited about this whole tournament here. And then you have OKC. If you want to look at an organization that hasn't won a championship, which is Orlando, which is OKC, the Mavericks have won one. Mavericks were in the finals last year. And I'm sure they're excited to maybe get to this point, but if they win an in-season tournament, I'm sure to a man, if I'm a reporter, the first thing, if they do win the tournament, I'd say, hey, how does this feel? They probably say, hey, it feels good, whatever. Would you trade this for an NBA Finals and a Finals ring? They would take that banner and that trophy and throw it into the ocean to get an NBA championship and an NBA banner raised to their rafters. Case closed. That's all I need to discuss there. But now the other big news in the association is Kevin Durant. Remember, he had a calf injury early on in the season and now tweaked his ankle in a game against the Spurs the other day to where he's going to be out for a week or two. And it's not as if Kevin Durant is 27 years old. What is he, 36 years of age? And granted that he's been a little bit more resilient with his recovery and with him being back in the lineup. It's not like when he was with the Nets, he was coming off an Achilles, and it seemed like he was in and out of the lineup more often than not. And here with the Suns, he's played pretty much almost every game, but, you know, you miss a week or two here, a week or two there. It's going to add up. And obviously with an NBA season that is just about a quarter of the way in, you still have another 60 games to go. And Durant, I know he's not going to be characterized as a load management guy, but you would think Mike Budenholzer and even the front office, they're going to take their time to make sure that he gets back, because although with him out of the lineup, the Suns have been terrible. And remember, we talked about it. They had that 9-2 start, and they were what? I believe 1-6 with him out of the lineup when he injured his right calf. And then now you have a scenario where his ankle, who knows if that's going to be a lingering injury similar to the calf, and I believe it's his left ankle. So he comes back from a right calf injury only to injure his left ankle. And now who knows what the next injury will be with him as you move on throughout the course of the season. So something to keep in mind, something to really pay attention to, because the Sun team that I picked as an under this year, and even though they came flying from the start with that torrid 9-2 record, played a little bit better of late. Now they're 12-8 and there's a 5 seed in the West. And with OKC, Houston playing very well, although they lost there, I believe, last night, and the Mavericks now moved themselves where they were hovering in that play-in 6, 7, 8 range. Now they're up to number 3, and they're flying high. Memphis as well, and even John Morant came out and says, I'm going to not dunk anymore. Says, I guess it wears on him throughout the course of the season, and why not? Hey, if he's going to be that much more efficient attacking the basket, going for layups as opposed to trying to posterize everybody, kudos to him. Warriors, as I talked about, with no Curry and Draymond, they have now lost 5 in a row, and you got to wonder whether or not that big start that they got off to, I believe they were 11-2 to start the year, including a win in Boston, I might add. Now they have really come back to earth. Are they going to be that team that is going to be what we thought they were last year, where they were pretty much in that 7-10 range? And even though they did eke into the play-in tournament, but they lost that first game, if you remember, to Sacramento, and then they were long gone. Is this the Warrior team that we would expect? And I got to be honest, that 11-2 start was, I'm not going to say smoke and mirrors, but I was surprised by that. Because it's not as if the team improved, and yes, they have a lot of infusion of young talent to go with the 2 veterans that have been there. And yes, I know you have Kevon Looney and Andrew Wiggins, who are veterans in their own right. But when we talk about the 2 guys that were the main core of this organization, with Clay now in Dallas, and with a lot of the young guys that are there that are trying to, the Jonathan Kumingas of the world, who are trying to be now, I guess, carrying that torch to see if they could be a team that could get back to a finals when they did 2 years ago. I was surprised by that start. And now, to me, it's leveled off a little bit to where I would expect this Warrior team to be in that range from maybe 4-10 when it's all said and done. But we'll see. Clippers and Nuggets, who have, of course, struggled, although they had a stretch where they played well and they were around the 3 seed, but now they're back down to number 8. And the Lakers have fizzled big time here. They were 10-4 to start their year, and now they have lost they've lost 6 of their last 8, including last night, where they lost by 41 down in Miami. And this is on the heels of a 29-point loss in Minnesota. And it's not as if the T-Wolves have lit the world on fire, because the T-Wolves are right now on the outside looking in, if you want to call it that here in this early part of the year. They're just a game over 500. But for the Lakers, who got off to a good start, and with some good moxie, good mojo, similar to the Golden State Warriors, where now are they kind of hovering where they belong, similar to Golden State last year, in that 7-10 range. And when you get blown out by 41 to a team that was at 500, and I get it that Miami, with Heat culture and Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler, but they have been mediocre this year. And I get it that they shot the lights out of the ball. Tyler Hero had 31, was 9 for 14 from 3. They made 22 threes in a game. But when you lose by 41 to a team that's 500, there isn't no ifs, ands, or buts. That is just a flat-out embarrassment, as stated by LeBron, as stated by the head coach, J.J. Redick. So they have a game in Atlanta tomorrow, and Atlanta's playing hot as they transition to the East. Atlanta, they've won 5 in a row, including beating Milwaukee, who stopped a 7-game winning streak in their own right. And now Milwaukee's in the top 6 of the Eastern Conference. Atlanta, 12-11. We talked about them making it to the play-in, as you know, the play-in tournament, or the in-season tournament. You know what I mean. So those are 2 teams that are riding high and playing very hot at the moment. Cleveland, Boston, we know at the top there of the East. Orlando, who lost to the Knicks a couple of nights ago, but then bounced back nicely there with a win against the 76ers. No shock there, as they're going to stay in Philly. In fact, they've been in the Northeast corridor pretty much since last Friday, playing the Nets back-to-back Friday, Sunday, the Knicks on Tuesday night, last night in Philly, and then they'll play in Philly tomorrow night as well. So Orlando, you think they'll get another win? As we know, the Sixers are having a long season, as we know. The Wizard losing streak continues. They've lost 15 in a row now, as their record is 2-17. And that is your NBA. Nothing else to really get into or unpack there. Now, as I turn my attention to the National Hockey League, as we got a couple of injury reports to discuss there. First and foremost, Alexander Ovechkin, who was skating the other day. Now, he was not suited up, did not put on any gear, no contact, just testing out the leg where he fractured his fibia, not his tibia, there in that game against the Utah Hockey Club. No reports have come out of that, whether or not there's a timetable, whether or not he's ahead of schedule. Just knowing that he's skating, testing it out is a surprise in his own right, because to fracture a tibia, whether it's a hairline or not, for a guy that's 39 years of age, and I understand he's indestructible when you look at throughout his whole career and his playing style, etc. But for him to get out there less than 2 weeks after fracturing his leg, is an accomplishment that is beyond belief. And for Ovechkin, I'm sure that he has the record weighing in on him. I'm sure that he wants to get back sooner than later. Right now, because there hasn't been any revealing of the extent of the skating, I'm sure they're probably going to poo-poo it. They're going to say that, yeah, he was out there, he was skating, yeah, he felt good, looked good, but is he going to be ready to play in the game? Is he going to be ready for contact? Is he going to be a little bit hesitant psychologically to know that he's not going to be that brute force? And I'm sure he's dialed it back a little bit, even at 39 years of age, where he can't just use his body as a human pinball. But for Ovechkin, you know they're going to proceed with caution. It's not going to be a situation where they're going to try to rush him back. There's still plenty of season to go. That even if he was on the timetable when he injured his leg, whether it be later this month or early January, he'll still have a shot to catch and surpass Wayne Gretzky, whether it be in late March or early April. Remember, the season doesn't end until the middle of April. So he'll still have some time left if he does happen to come back the first week of January. But knowing that he's skating is a good sign, but skating is one thing. I could skate on a broken leg, but that means I'm going very, very slow. And granted, I am nowhere near a hockey player, or in the shape of a hockey player for that matter, or even in the realm of a future Hall of Famer and a one Alex Ovechkin. But the bottom line is that just because he was skating doesn't mean that he was circling around the rink at top speed or taking shots, or obviously no contact, or didn't have the full equipment on, as was read in the article there, where he just pretty much had a warm-up suit and was just out there just testing the leg to see whether or not he gets enough push or what have you. And since there hasn't been a report on his leg on whether or not he's going to be back in the lineup at any point in the near future, that I'm sure we'll probably find out in the days and weeks to come. But with the NHLs, we all know when it comes to these injuries, whether it's an upper body injury, lower body injury, it's almost as if this is top secret to the sport and really much to the sports fan to know whether or not, well, wait a minute, all right, he has a lower body injury. We know the extent of Ovechkin's, but can we get a diagnosis? Can we get an idea as to how this went? Obviously, it's going to be on the wraps until we get the official word on whether or not he'll be back in the lineup at some point. Similar to Austin Matthews, who scored a goal there the other night, and the Maple Leafs, they're riding high there in the Atlantic, as we know. 34 points, and the Capitals continue to play well, although they lost there the other night as they had a big winning streak in their own right. But they are currently tied with the Devils there. And the Devils beat the Rangers, who, as we talked about there on Monday, have not played well here. But another big injury that took place in the NHL was to Tyler Sequin, the winger for the Dallas Stars. And the Stars trying to find their way in that Central Division with the Wild and the Winnipeg Jets, who have really taken a big hit after their torrid start. Sagan's going to be out 4 to 6 months after getting a surgery on his hip, where I believe it was the labrum there in his hip, which needed some reconstruction. So to think 4 to 6 months, do the math, people, he's going to be out the rest of the year. Or if he does happen to come back and is on schedule, you're talking about probably somewhere in the latter first round or maybe early second round of the playoffs. 6 months is going to set you back to early June, which means the Cup Finals. Now, I picked the Stars to go to a final. I'm sure there's a lot of aspirations considering that they've been to back-to-back conference finals. But for the Stars, losing a player like that, where he got off to a good start this year, 9 goals, 20 points in the first 20 games, had missed 5 games earlier this year. I don't believe it was for the hip, it was for other injuries. But for Sagan, who's been in the league a long time, former Bruin who won a Stanley Cup there back in 2011, and now I believe he's, 32, 33 years of age, a guy that, yes, could have been a big focal point to the Stars to try to get to where they want to go here in this regular season, but are not going to have him, and who knows what his prognosis is going to be as far as him being ahead of schedule during rehab, etc. But that is a huge loss for the Stars as they try to move forward here with their regular season. But other than that, nothing else to really discuss. Standings have pretty much been where they are. Minnesota's played very well. Now they're in first place. I mean, think about this. For the Jets to get off to the start that they did at 15-1, Minnesota's played well. And the Jets, it doesn't help that they've lost 4 in a row, and the Wild have won 4 in a row. That's why they have a 2-point lead and the most points in the National Hockey League as of right now, because right behind them are the Vegas Golden Knights with 37 points, and they played very well this year. The Kings right behind them as far as point totals are concerned. And they actually beat the Stars there last night in LA. Just goes to show you how the Stars, that we talked about, losing some firepower there offensively. So NHL, that's what you have there. Eastern Conference, Devils, as I mentioned, tied with the Capitals there in first place. Now the Devils, they have a disadvantage because they've played 28 games. Remember, they started off their season overseas to the Czech Republic against Buffalo. So a lot of the teams in their division, they have 3 games in hand, whether you are the Capitals, the Hurricanes, Rangers at 4 games in hand. So Devils right now playing from in front, but that'll even itself out as you get deeper into the season. But nothing else to really discuss there when we're talking about the National Hockey League. And then now let me get into the batter's box as we get set for the winter meetings, which will kick off in Dallas Sunday from then until this time next week, meaning next Thursday. Now, I'm sure people are saying, well, Jay Reels, what do you got to think about Juan Soto, where the report had come out that he's planning to pick or take his choice of which team he's going to finally get his land. I don't want to say finally, it's a little too strong, but with all of the rumors and all of the talk and all of the analysis and all of the dark horses and all this team's the front runner. And I said this a couple of weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago on the podcast. I don't want to hear it. Wake me up wherever he signs. Wake me up to what hat he's going to put on when he gets to the podium where he signs his John Hancock or Juan Soto on the dotted line for the next, we would think, dozen years. So let's see if it's going to happen right before the winter meetings. Could it happen Saturday, similar to Shohei Ohtani last year when he signed his deal? As you know, $700 million, $680 of it deferred. And that's another story with the Dodgers signing all these players where they have a total of $1 billion in deferred money, whether that's to Tyler Glasnow, whether that's to, I believe, Yamamoto. So they've been able to manipulate the system here to where they are not footing the bill on a salary cap, or it's not that it's a salary cap, but for their accumulation of all the salaries over the years and what's their combined payroll, this would be in the 500 millions. But because they are playing with the game of deferring money to a lot of their players and that they've recently signed, and that also includes Tommy Edman, I might add, and I believe Blake Snell as well. Remember, they gave him a $52 million bonus right up front, which doesn't count to their payroll. So whatever the annual average for the salary for Blake Snell is, it's going to pale in comparison to what the contract would be if you didn't get that $52 million bonus right off the bat. So the Dodgers are over here playing around like this to where, yes, we may have a payroll that could be in the $400 and $500 million stratosphere, but because we deferred these contracts, no, our payroll going into 2025 could be at $300 million or 200 and whatever million it may be. So just keep that in mind, as I'm sure Major League Baseball is going to have to crack down on this, because you mean to tell me that Steve Cohen is not thinking the same thing when he's trying to sign Soto, although he said he wouldn't take deferred money? That is a different situation altogether. But let's just say if they're going to sign Pete Alonso, you mean to tell me they're not going to try to flirt with the idea, hey, Pete, do you mind if we give you some deferred money? Or free agent X, we want to give you a big-time contract, but we need to give you deferred money. Or free agent Y, same deal. So keep that in mind as you're looking at this process with the Corbin Burnses of the world, with the Willie Adamases of the world, Max Fried, etc. But back to Soto, if he does come out, whether it be right before the winter meeting so everybody can talk about it. I know Saturday is a kind of a weird day to bring it up, but that happened to Ohtani last year. I'll never forget, I was in South Jersey when the news came out about Ohtani signing a $700 million deal. And yes, 680 of that deferred. But, okay, will the same happen here with Soto? I don't know, but I would think, and this is the only thing I'll say about this before I move on, I would think that if a decision has been made, but it will be announced in the coming days, it probably will be, if not Sunday, leading into Monday, but probably to start off the week, maybe, just maybe, to fizzle out a little bit of what's going to take place in the NFL and even college football for that matter, so that the baseball could get a little bit of press on the back pages regarding their biggest free agent. That's all I'll say about that. And when he does sign, obviously we'll unpack it. But the other big news of this week, Rob Manfred had tweeted out now I don't want to say it's maybe it is an idea or just not necessarily a proposal, but he upset the baseball fan, yours truly included, to where he was flirting with this thought about a golden at bat. And what the golden at bat is to have, let's say, the team's best hitter. Let's say if they batted in the bottom of the eighth and he struck out, and he's your cleanup hitter. And knowing that it's 5, 6, and 7 to lead off in the bottom of the ninth, or even top of the ninth, doesn't matter. So now you have the closer coming in, and it's 5, 6, 7, and your cleanup hitter already struck out, so that's it. He's going to be done unless there's a big rally. But if, let's say, they're down by 1 run, he's still not going to see an at-bat there, because if you're down by 1, if you're down by 3, different story. But if you're down by 1, So my thing is that you mean to tell me this golden at-bat will now provide the opportunity of your cleanup hitter that in the bottom of the ninth, let's just say for argument's sake, it's the 5 hitter gets up, makes an out, 6 hitter gets up, makes an out, your 7 hitter, whomever that may be, if he's not a formidable hitter or if he's not a power hitter, I mean, you mean to tell me that you could get your cleanup hitter to bat in that 7 spot to see if he could get one big swing to tie the game? What? Seriously? I understand baseball's trying to tweak their sport, and we've seen this over the last few years with the rules changes, with the pitch clock, which I like, with the 2 throws over the first base, which I like, which increases the amount of stolen bases in the sport, the shift, which I like, and even though that hasn't been fully, yes, it's been enacted, but you can still have the shortstop play a shade over from second base, to where if a ball's hit up the middle, you think it's going to go through, but you see the shortstop there or the second baseman there. So, right, you're not going to have the 3 guys on the right side of the infield as you saw once upon a time. I understand that. But I like what they did with the shift. And a lot of those rule changes I dig. I totally like. The intentional walk, the automatic 4 pitch, please. We don't need the pitcher to throw 4 times to the catcher. All those rules I could totally go for. The ghost runner at second, I thought that was just a pandemic thing to speed up the game, but now it's implemented just for the regular season, so they don't have a situation where you're playing in the 18th inning and you're still haven't decided the game. All right, fine. Those games are usually once in a blue. Yes, you can get a game that goes to the 12th, 13th inning. All right, but fine. I can live with the ghost runner. I still don't like it, but I can live with it now because I want to speed up the game. This thing with the golden at bat, I don't want any part of it. And yes, it could be easy for me to say that now. There's no games involved. But let's say in April where, for argument's sake, it's the bottom of the order and they're down 3-2 to the Phillies. And wow, I can get Francisco Lindor to come up maybe to hit a home run. Well, maybe I think I'd like that rule. Well, you know what? I'm more of a purist. I'm more of a traditionalist. Keep the game the way it is. And yes, I understand it's going to add excitement. It's going to add another wrinkle to keep up with the Joneses with the other sports, whether that be with the NBA and even to a certain extent the NHL, what they do as far as their rules and what they've tweaked, especially in overtime, the 3-on-3 skating during that 5-minute period. I get it, to open it up a little bit more for better chance for a team to score as opposed to just going 4-on-4 and nobody scoring and then straight to the shootout. I get it, totally understood, but on the surface, and even as I thought about it, I don't like it. Keep the game the way it is. And again, this isn't a rule that they're going to implement. This isn't something that's going to happen. And if it does, I'm sure they're going to start it off as a trial period with the minor leagues and to see how that's going to play out. And they're going to get all their data and try to iron it out as best as possible, similar to what they've done with the pitch clock and even with the automated strike zone, etc. So this isn't anything that's going to be on the radar for Major League Baseball, whether it be next year, 2026 or 27. This is something that Rob Manfred threw out. And listen, he has every right to do that. It's fine with me. I don't have a problem with it. But if he's going to be really serious about it, to think that, yes, let's add this in there, to me, it's a gimmick. It's a joke. I understand what he's trying to do. And yes, will it attract maybe more eyeballs, or even for the baseball fan, even the purist like myself, to say, wait a minute, it's the bottom of the order, and I can have my cleanup hitter or my third place hitter come up here in a big spot to tie the game, or if we're down by a run, or if one of my first three guys get on and we're down by 2, that a 2-run homer could tie the game. Yeah, of course, the thought sounds good, but no. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's a situation where it's not broke, so why fix it? And then to think that at bat that the player got in the 8th inning, or let's say even in the 7th inning, he can get that bat in the 8th inning. And they can only do it once per game, I get it. It's not like it's an ongoing thing. And you could do it on early in the game too, I get that. But don't mess with it. Please, Major League Baseball, and I understand this is just a thought. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but still, watch us get some legs and some traction. And next thing you know, 5 years from now, knock on wood, God willing, on the podcast, here I am. I'm going to be talking about it from a negative standpoint, that they're actually going to implement this thing in Major League Baseball. As far as some signings, you got some minor ones here. Matthew Boyd, the former Detroit Tiger and Cleveland Guardian, he signed with the Cubs, 2 years, $29 million. The lefty, Kyle Higashioka, former Padre and Yankees, Texas Rangers, 2-year deal. And Aroldis Chapman signed with the Red Sox, 1 year, a little less than $11 million. I don't know if he's going to be your closer, your 8th inning guy, because Kenley Jansen, I believe, is a free agent. I don't know that for sure, but Jansen, who has pitched well in Boston, has had his moments, but I don't know. I guess bringing in Chapman, is he not going to be your closer here, even at 37 years of age? And yes, his fastball could either go 98 or 105. All right, we know that Chapman is a guy that is electric, but long in the tooth, age-wise, and I don't know how much you're going to get out of him, even with the 1 year, but the Red Sox said, the hell with it. Let's take a flyer and see what Chapman could do. And Chapman, of course, has bounced around over the years, Texas, with the Pirates this last year. So minor signings. Let's see, with the winter meetings kicking off there on Sunday, and with the specter of Soto and the big free agent pitchers, as I mentioned, the Corbin Burnses, Max Frieds, the position players, Willie Adamases, etc., going down the list. Pete Alonso. Let's see if the winter meetings and the hot stove will really heat up here as we get into the first week of December. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you so much for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. If you haven't done so, people, please subscribe, rate, review, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, even video on Spotify, people. Or to really get the full experience, go to my YouTube channel at JReels to also watch the podcast on video. And also subscribe there, like, leave a comment. I need as much support as possible, people. I'm an independent content creator trying to make a living out of this, trying to generate some income, revenue, etc. So yes, I don't have a full-time and I'm doing this part-time. Yes, I did that for 5 years, and now here it is going on 6 and 7 when we get to March 1st, 7 years with this podcast. So yes, I am not going anywhere. I've had over 500 episodes in my back pocket. So please, people, I need your support. I need your help. Whatever you could do, share with your family, friends, foes, frenemies out there, to the casual, diehard, the rabid, the good sports fan in your life. Screenshot it. Send it to me on any of my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JReels Podcast, Twitter, JReels1, just a number. If you have any questions, comments, hit me up at the jreelspodcast@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because one more time, I'm not going anywhere. This is what I've been doing here, going on 7 years, not only for the love of what it is that I do, but yes, I want to earn a living. I want to be able to at least bear the fruits of my labor. And not to say that it's all about money, but if I'm doing this full time, hey, your boy has to make a living. So please, I implore you to go on all the sites, all the podcast networks that you listen to, share it with your people, share it with your family, etc. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it, because whether you do or do not know, one more time, this is my love, this is my passion, this is what fuels me, this is what I wake up every day to not only watch games, read what's going on, follow what's happening, and get a pulse on all that's happening with nothing but passion, fire, fury, energy, which will never wane, people, as long as I'm in front of this camera and in front of this mic, with nothing but my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the J Reels podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the J Reels podcast, on the flip, baby.